Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Achieving Sustainability Goals Using BIM. We have a large group here today for this very important and relevant topic. We welcome attendees from all over the world, and I hope everyone is doing well and keeping safe. This is Anne-Marie Pizzatelli, and I'm the Global Head of Marketing for the Built Environment at BSI. BIM is an information management process underpinned by collaborative working in digital technologies. BIM is all about collaboration between engineers, owners, architects, and contractors in a three-dimensional virtual construction environment, and it shares information across these disciplines. This structured and collaborative environment is also critical to implement data-driven sustainability programs, allowing for greater transparency, efficiency, and control of building systems. This webinar will explore where these fundamental elements of BIM can help drive and improve sustainability in the built environment. I would now like to introduce today's speakers. Keith Bryan is the Director of Built Environment, BSI Americas. Keith leads the sector in the Americas, representing the full portfolio of BSI products and services for clients and key stakeholders. He offers a variety of experience integrating holistic solutions into the built environment, including greenhouse gas accounting, climate risk management, energy efficiency, resilience, environmental social governance, ESG, and green building programs. Rahul Shah is a Sector Development Director, BSI EMEA. During his 24 years plus career, Rahul has gained experience in implementing various digital initiatives on a diverse range of products, including large-scale, multi-billion-pound urban regeneration schemes through to hospitals, airports, residential, commercial data centers, mixed-use public spaces, stadiums, and metros. In his current role at BSI, Rahul drives the digital transformation agenda in the built environment globally and supports clients in digital transformation, innovation, BIM, digital twins, smart cities, Internet of Things, and information security and resilience. Please welcome Keith and Rahul. Hi, guys.
Thank you. Hey, it's great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Now, next slide, just some webinar logistics. Our webinar will run 60 minutes today with some time for Q&A at the end. You have joined a muted webinar, so you should be able to hear us clearly. Next slide. If you would like to ask us a question, have a look for the questions box and type your question there. We will do our best to answer these at the end of today's webinar. If you can't hear us, please let us know using the question box. Next slide. All of our participants today will receive some great featured handouts, including our sustainability report, a green print for the sustainable built environment, plus our ever popular little book of BIM, republished and updated in 2023, and some other giveaways as well. However, you must complete the post-event survey in order to get the handouts. I will give a reminder before the end of today's webinar. Now, we will have some polls today. I hope everybody can take part. Polls are a great way, I'm going to launch the polls, are a great way to interact with the rest of the audience. So first of all, I'm going to launch the first poll, and here it is. Is your organization already using BIM? So please select one of the following options. We have never heard of it. We know about it, but have not started using it. We're in the process of implementing, but we could use improvements. We have a mature BIM program. Other, please answer in the chat or questions. So once again, is your organization already using BIM? So I'll give people a chance to vote in the poll. So you can, maybe you've never heard of it, maybe you've heard about it but have not started using it, and that's why you're here today to learn about it. You're in the process of implementing but are still could use some improvements, or you have a mature BIM program, or other, please use the question box. So we're going to give people a few more seconds to vote. And so I'm going to give people 5 more seconds. I think most people have voted, so I will close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll and we will look at the results. And let's share the results. Okay, is your organization already using BIM? Okay, so it looks like Oh, 40% are in the process of implementing, but you could use improvement. 25% of mature BIM program, or 23% have heard about it but are not using it. So great range of responses. Any surprises, Raul and Keith, in this poll?
Not really. I mean, it's good to see a good balance here, Anne-Marie, from my side, that we have people who already know about it but haven't started. So good to have them on the call and hope that they get, relevant, useful insights for them to get started. But also, it's good to see that majority of them have, that 40%, in the process, but could use improvement. So it's good to have them. So really looking forward to the conversation. I don't know, Keith, if you have any thoughts, man.
Yeah, a very similar response. I'm actually a little surprised on how many people have a mature BIM program already. That's great to see. Hopefully, you can pull some things from this webinar on how to expand the benefits that you could get from that mature BIM program. So awesome. Thank you for taking part in that first poll. And I think we have another one coming right up.
Right. So let me, okay, go to the next poll. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go to our next poll now. Let's see if I can do this. Let's do the next one and let's launch the next poll. When you think of BIM, what comes to mind? Please select one. So when you think of BIM, what comes to mind? 3D modeling and digital twins, software products, data governance and management, standards and best practices, other. Please use the chat or questions box. So when you think of BIM, what comes to mind? There's a lot of different elements in BIM. So do you think of 3D modeling and digital twins, software products, data governance and management, standards and best practices, other? Please use the questions box. So I'm going to give people a few minutes to vote. Let's see what comes out here. Should be some interesting observations. And I'm going to give everybody a few more seconds to vote. And once everybody has voted, we will close the poll. So let us know what you think of BIM, what comes to mind. Okay, I think almost everybody has voted, so I will close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's close the poll and let's share the results. Okay, so let's see. When you think of BIM, what comes to mind? 38% say 3D modeling and digital twins, and 38% say data governance and management. Quite interesting, quite an even split. And then also standards and best practices, a little bit for software products and other. We've put in the chat or the questions. Wow, interesting. So Raul, any surprises here?
Not really, no. But really good to see the honest feedback from the audience. That for some, when it comes to BIM, the first thing they think of is software products, and for others, it's like standards and best practices. And to be honest, it's all the answers. It's nothing right or wrong here. It's good to see the perspective and where people are. And I guess if we map these to the previous ones, where people are aware, but they haven't started the journey, or, they've started, but they could improve. So I think there is that alignment there too. So no, really good to see that nice balance here.
Keith,
Yeah,
any comments?
I agree. I think this was somewhat of a trick question because I'm sure there were multiple people answering, trying to figure out which one was more front of mind when you start to think of BIM. But yeah, very much a trick question. All of these are incredibly important to implement BIM. So thank you all for your perspective here. I was actually surprised that software products weren't responded to more prevalently. So yeah, that's actually an interesting result. So
Great. Great. Thank you all for voting in the polls. I'm going to close the poll and hide it now and turn it over to Keith and Raul.
Great, thanks, Anne-Marie. Okay, so today's topic, of course, is achieving sustainability goals with BIM, and as we just kind of covered with that last poll question, one of the things that we like to figure out whenever we're starting to talk about these topics is what exactly is the scope of this discussion. If we just talk about sustainability and we just talk about BIM, we could be here all day and still not cover both subjects completely. So first off, I just want to kind of define what we're talking about when we're talking about sustainability, and then Rahul will give a little bit of an overview of what we're talking about with BIM, and then we'll kind of go out into the overlap of those two subjects. So, sustainability, there's a lot of things that we could talk about. Now, front of mind, I think you're going to start to think about things like greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity, some equity issues, water and waste management, things of that sort, right? For the purposes of today's discussion, we've narrowed it down into a few key categories, but one of the biggest ones that we like to talk about is just carbon management, right? And in the built environment, there are essentially, to oversimplify things, there are two main sources of carbon when you're talking about the life cycle of a building. The first, on the left, is when a building is being constructed, you are gathering raw materials, you're making products, you're transporting all that stuff to the site, you're building the building itself, and all of that has an embodied carbon or embodied emissions to it. So that's roughly speaking, in historical building practices, about 50% of the carbon emissions for the life cycle of the building. The other side of the coin is what we have primarily been focusing on for the last 20, 25 years. It's what people are pretty familiar with, which is that operational carbon emissions. And that is typically associated with energy usage, water usage, things of that sort. So, everybody knows about retrofits of lighting and water reduction initiatives, and all of that comes down to operational carbon emissions. So that's just a very high level overview of carbon emissions in the built environment. Now, when we're talking about sources of carbon, this hits throughout the life cycle. So this is not just at the construction phase. It's not just at the operational phase. There are portions of carbon emissions that happen throughout the entire life cycle of the building, all the way from when products are manufactured, through the construction phase, through the operations phase, and then even into end of life phase. And we can use BIM in order to manage different aspects of this life cycle process in order to increase the sustainability of that particular building during its life cycle. So we'll talk a little bit about these different life cycles, but I wanted to introduce this concept. This is actually from the British Standard 15978, so authored by BSI. This graphic is by the New Buildings Institute. It's a much prettier version than what's in the standards document itself, so thank you to New Buildings. They one-upped us with the graphic, so good for them. So this is the life cycle of a building, but inevitably, everybody that's talking about carbon emissions in the built environment is also starting to look at the different scopes of those emissions, right? So I'm sure just about everybody on the call here has probably heard of scopes 1 through 3 emissions. So this is just a very high level overview coming from the greenhouse gas protocol, which is the framework that's used by 85% of organizations out there for monitoring greenhouse gas. So as you can see, scope 1 emissions are things that are generated from the buildings themselves. So any fleet vehicles, any generators that are on site, things like that, emissions directly from that particular facility. Scope 2 is anything, this is probably what most people are familiar with. This is purchased electricity, purchased natural gas, things that you buy. So you are responsible for the emissions, but they're not generated directly on site. right? So that's scope 2 emissions. And then scope 3 are literally anything and everything else, right? So all the emissions that are emitted in the value chain, both upstream and downstream. So things that you purchase, things of that sort, anything that you throw away at the end, any emissions that your products cause once you sell them to somebody else, all of that falls under scope 3. So we're certainly not going to dive into this, but it's just helpful to understand when we're talking about emissions factors that there's more than just how much energy your building is consuming when you're talking about life cycle carbon or greenhouse gas emissions for a building. So on that note, I will turn it over to Rahul to give just a basic overview of what BIM is, and then we'll start talking about the overlap of sustainability/carbon discussion with what BIM can do. So Rahul, over to you.
Thank you, Keith. And yeah, it's quite fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to unpacking, this how BIM can support those various sources of, the carbon emissions and how we can manage that. So thank you, Keith, for setting the scene. So we already saw, and that was quite interesting poll results. What BIM is and what comes to mind, when people think of BIM, something, of software first, or it's a 3D modeling. And I would like to, in the next few minutes, go back to the first principle of what BIM is. It's essentially a process of managing information, producing information, and exchanging information throughout the entire life cycle of a built asset, right from day one of design all the way through to procurement, construction, commissioning, handover, and most importantly, into the operation, which is the largest phase of the asset life cycle, right, into the operation and decommissioning. So it is a set of processes about information management, production, and exchange. If we go to the next slide, then it's just summarizing that BIM is about, think of BIM as a whole life cycle approach and not just the design or not just the construction, but think of BIM as a whole life cycle approach from information management point of view, day one of the design process or a feasibility study process, all the way through to design, construction, and operations, underpinned by collaborative working. It will require, multi-stakeholder collaboration throughout the entire life cycle in terms of not only producing information, but exchanging, managing, and using it to make informed decisions based on information. So what is BIM? It's about information management throughout the whole life cycle of a built asset, underpinned by collaborative working. Right? We go to the next slide, please. Maybe step back a little bit, and I'm pretty sure most of you on the call would have gone through these, the ones, particularly the ones, with the matured BIM program. They say the matured BIM program, but most of you, I'm sure, are going through this kind of sort of thinking in your own businesses as part of developing your own BIM strategy and digital strategies. Why BIM? And just to give a global perspective on it, look at this, one of a very important sort of studies conducted by World Economic Forums, and these are the top 3 sort of reasons and the value add from clients and asset owners point of that they want to reduce construction and whole life cost. But the most important one is about the substantial reduction of environmental impact. And we all know that we have a code red warning when it comes to climate change and the whole issue around climate risk, and that is the #1 priority from most clients and asset owners as well. How can structured information management support reduction in carbon and achieve those the net zero ambitions? And the last but not the least is about we are dealing with an exponential increase in rapid urbanizations around the world. And given the limited resources, in terms of people and tools and whatnot, how can we respond to that ever increasing urbanization demand by using, the information management and digital technologies combined? These are some of the top 3 sort of, strategic, sort of objectives why BIM is so is in demand in the built environment sector now. Go to the next one, please. I'd like to just, I'm sure most of you would have seen, some kind of sort of research data about, the productivity challenge we have in the built environment sector. And this is one of the international studies which highlights actually, that, and this is quite, I don't know, the users on the call, how you see this, but, conducted with 500 plus, built environment sector clients. And you can see on the screen that almost 35% of the time is spent on non-optimal activities. And this is quite a significant number. You can say unproductive time spent on either looking for information and whatnot. So if we go on to the next slide, and we can see, if we look at some of the reasons, and the top three reasons you can see on the screen are, the number one is about poor communication about, amongst the project stakeholders, right? So when we think about BIM, it's about, as we discussed earlier, it's about information management, whole life cycle approach, underpinned by collaborative working, right? And so you got to improve that communication, exchange of information, sharing of information using common data environment and so forth. The second, the most, the reason is the lack of responsiveness of data or information delivery. Is the information or the drawing or the schedules or whatever you're looking on site as part of the construction is the right version, is the latest version, things like that. So it's the confidence in the accuracy of the available information as well, right? So these are some of the reasons why that 35% of the time spent on non-optimal, non-productive activities, right? Which we are trying to address through structured information management, call it BIM. Go to the next one. And so that was a productivity side of things. We have some challenges in our sector about productivity. And this is another study, international study, that highlights, again, quite shocking numbers here, the waste due to bad data and how much it cost the construction industry, and these are, again, quite shocking numbers, and see how we can support, address this challenge through use of BIM and structured information management. Go to the next one, please. And I don't know if you are familiar with this framework, but we have this international good practice, ISO 19650, which was developed based on the early British standards, BS 1192 and PAS 1192 series of standards. This international good practice on information management is structured in a way to support you in not only organizing information, but also digitizing information in a structured way. So I would highly recommend, if you haven't already looked at these ISO 19650 series of standards, there are, different parts of these, BIM standards. Part 2 focuses mostly on design and delivery phase of the asset life cycle. Part 3 focuses on, sort of operations and asset management side of the asset life cycle. Part 4 is focused mainly on how you exchange information and, the things that you need to consider. And part 5 is mostly about the security of the data and, what you need to think about when, operating in that BIM sort of environment, and have that security minded approach. And then part 6 is under development, which would focus largely on the safety side of, the built environment, processes, and what you need to consider to use BIM for safety as well. But these part 1 to part 5 are already available, published, available for you to use. Go to the next one, please. When you think about BIM and implementing BIM in your organization, I'm sure you would have heard about, it's always about any change program, it's always about people, process, and technology, and BIM is no different. And people will play, as like similar to any other change program, people will play a critical role in terms of enabling successful BIM implementation. You have to identify, there will be different job roles in your business. You have to identify, what sort of interface they will have with BIM tools and processes and technologies, and empower them to use BIM as part of the day-to-day sort of job roles, whether it's design managers, project managers, quantity surveyors, cost planners, and et cetera, et cetera. And therefore, you need to then think about, various skills levels for different job roles as well, and empower people to take ownership of using BIM as part of the day-to-day job functions. Processes is a glue between people and technology, that you need to also develop standards and processes using the international good practices ISO 19650. And technology is given, and some of you already thought about software products. When it comes to BIM, you need hardware, you need software, you also need the proper IT infrastructure to enable the implementation. Go to the next one, please. And think of finally, just to wrap it up in terms of how BIM can support, and we will try and unpack now in the next few slides between me and Keith, focusing on sustainability. But these are some of the sort of top BIM benefits that you can have, and most of them you can see that are related to contributing towards better quality, safety, and sustainability eventually. Reduction in rework and waste is, I'm sure most of you would have experienced. We have already embarked on BIM journey. Designing out waste is another one of the use cases or benefits, that once you start using it properly, you can design out waste, not during just design and construction phase, but also during operation phase also. So I don't want to dwell too much into this, because Keith and I are going to go deep into some of the sort of value add points during different phases of the life cycle in the next slides now.
Excellent. Thank you, Rahul. Appreciate it. Yeah, so just moving on to the next slide here. I showed this one earlier just to give you an idea of what sorts of emissions we're looking at for the different life cycle stages. So what we're going to do now is just go through each one of these life cycle stages and address emissions or ways that BIM can improve your sustainability programs. But first, I just wanted to kind of open it up with a poll question to get some gauge of the audience in regards to what we're about to discuss. So I'll turn it over to Anne-Marie briefly, and then we'll be back to talk about sustainability. Anne-Marie?
Hi there. Thanks, Keith. And let's go to our final poll, or our third poll today, and I'm going to launch it. Here we go. What phase of the asset life cycle do you think benefits most from the use of BIM? Do you think it's the products, design and construction phase, operation and maintenance, end of life or decommissioning, or other? Please answer in the chat or questions. So what phase of the asset life cycle do you think benefits most from the use of BIM? So we're going to let people vote in the poll. So I see that people are voting. So let us know. This is quite an interesting question, because I'm sure we're going to get a lot of different answers. So is it the products, the design, the construction phase? Is it the operation and maintenance phase, decommissioning or end of life? Or is it another phase that you may wish to answer in the question box? So interesting question. What phase of the asset life cycle do you think benefits the most from the use of BIM? Let's see, we've got a lot of people voting. So I'll give everybody a few more seconds so that they can think about and vote in the poll. And looks like I'm going to give 5 more seconds, and then we're going to close the poll. So please vote. I'm going to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's close the poll and share the results. Okay, what phase of the asset life cycle do you think benefits most from the use of BIM? And wow, 60% say design and construction. So quite a strong number of respondents say design and construction. 60%, 23 operation and maintenance, and then other. We'll take a look in the question box. But Raul and Keith, any surprises there?
You do want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, this is exactly what I would expect with the current usage of BIM in the sector, right? So mostly BIM is being applied in the design and construction phase to improve things like cost and quality and timeliness of delivery results. So this is actually good because this leads into our discussion well. Totally agree that this is the current state of the buildings process. Raul, you?
Yeah, no, thanks, Keith. And I completely agree that it's a current state. But what is encouraging for me to hear and see is that 23% believe that it's the operation and maintenance phase, which is really encouraging to see, because and we're going to unpack that in a minute as well. But whilst BIM can offer those tangible benefits now, here and now, during the design and construction phase, which might be, I don't know, 10% of the overall life cycle of the asset, that 90% of the asset life cycle, the benefits to be gained during operations and maintenance. So it's really good to see that thinking is also sort of coming through as well in the responses. So not good.
Just some comments in the questions box. One of our attendees says every phase from selecting the products to the end of life cycle. We have another person who says, I'm guessing and think it can apply to all of them, but perhaps not equally though. And then we have one of our others saying, other, it applies to all of the above, I would say. And
Absolutely. So again, this is somewhat of a trick question. It certainly applies to all of these phases, and depending on your prioritization and what you're looking to achieve, it can be more or less impactful for different stages. If you're primarily money focused, it might impact one stage more than if you're primarily, say, waste reduction focused, right? So absolutely. We've got two trick questions, so thank you to those three folks for catching that.
Great, and thank you for all the comments. And now I'm going to hide this poll and to hand it back over to Raul and Keith.
Great. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Thanks for everybody that answered those poll questions. Appreciate it. All right, like I mentioned, we're certainly getting good use out of this graphic, but so what we wanted to do is not only break this down into the different life cycle phases, the product, construction, maintenance, use, end of life, et cetera, but also give you just a high level overview of the different sustainability goal areas that you might want to focus on, right? So for the purposes of today's webinar, we've narrowed those down to energy, water, waste, and what we're calling quality, or we could also call it efficiency or something of that sort, right? Quality is things like improvement of processes, improvement of speed, well, the obvious improvement of quality of materials or final product, that sort of thing. And the other three, I think, are somewhat self-explanatory. So go ahead and go to the next slide, and we'll start right in with the product phase, right? So what I've done here is color coded them, and if you are have trouble viewing color, no problem. The version that we send out next week will have these labeled as energy, wastewater, or quality, not just color coded. So generally speaking, when you're looking at the product phase, obviously there's a ton of potential benefits here. The first ones are in the energy category. Just the reduction of process-related energy is such a huge benefit when it comes to BIM. Now, BIM enables this by being able to give you more precise ideas of what products are going to be used, right? So if you can, get more precision in the product need, then you obviously don't have to order as much excess product. That translates into the producers of that product not having to put the energy into making that product, right? So this is it's one of those down the chain impacts that happens from just using BIM to design and construct your building, right? So in addition, modeling can actually increase the use of low carbon materials, right? So you can in advance look at things like where structural differences in concrete could be taken advantage of to order lower carbon concrete for things like walkways and whatnot that are not structural impacts, right? And all of that stuff cascades down into the product level where those materials are initially either extracted or produced themselves, right? In addition, carbon emissions can be forecast and provided at that full life cycle level. So often you see people having discussions about trade-off between higher quality and higher carbon materials versus lower quality or lower carbon materials, right? And looking at it from just the initial purchase perspective can often skew the discussion away from sustainability and more just into cost and things of that sort. So a lot of times higher quality materials, they last longer, right? So if you can get a material that lasts longer, that means you don't have to reorder it as often. It means it doesn't have to be produced as often, right? And the reduction of that, the need for producing that, it ultimately results in a decrease in emissions. Very similar in the water category, obviously process related water, depending on what you're making, what kind of products you're making, is going to be optimized. I intentionally chose the word optimized instead of reduced because you might just produce less product and therefore use less water, but that is still an optimization of water. And then the last bullet falls into the waste category there. As you can more precisely spec out or scope out the amount of material that you're going to need for different elements of your building construction process, that precise calculation results in being able to order exactly what you need. So on the product side of things, they only have to produce the exact amount that you need instead of the 10% excess that you would typically ship to a construction site in order to make sure you had enough materials. So that's all the high level stuff for products. There are certainly more bullets that can be added here, and I welcome anybody to add anything in chat if you feel like we're missing something huge or you just want to add something. Rahul, anything you want to add to this particular slide?
No. I think you captured it beautifully, Keith. There, I just wanted to highlight that the second bullet point, Keith, that I don't know whether it's worth clarifying to the audience that the word modeling doesn't mean 3D modeling. It means more of a information modeling, and that information model that you can use to analyze, as Keith said, about any structural analysis or thermal analysis or et cetera, et cetera. Is that correct, Keith?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. That doesn't necessarily mean visualization. It just means that proper scoping or proper specking of what materials you'll end up needing.
Yeah. So no, thank you. Other than that, excellent, and look forward to some questions during Q&A from the audience, Keith, on that one. Thank you. So I'll move on to the next one. The next phase is according to that process and roadmap, design and construction. And I guess this list can go to multiple slides. And I'm sure most of you said 60% of you see the advantage of BIM, the most benefits during design and construction. So I'm pretty sure that you have also identified many of these kind of similar sort of use cases and benefits for you and your organizations. So if you look at it from so we're going to look at it from four different lenses, right? So from energy point of view, for example, and one of the lowest hanging fruits of BIM in early when you are in your early sort of phase of implementation, you would say that you are able to produce all the design and construction sort of deliverables faster, so increasing productivity, improving efficiencies, and so forth. And therefore, the point to be made there is the use of computer power and energy that can be reduced to produce deliverables, right? So that itself contributes towards that during design and construction, in terms of reducing computing power. A reduction in material storage again reduces energy for climate controls and things. So think about having an opportunity to coordinate and align all the key parts in advance, and facilitating to a degree and streamlining that site-based delivery processes so that you don't have to stack tons and tons of material on site and then do everything on site, coordination, versus you can streamline the delivery and therefore you can reduce to a degree, the material storage needs on site and therefore reduction in energy use. So these are some of the, I'm not going to read out all the bullet points, otherwise we'll sit here for hours. I'm just mindful of time as well and want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. But these are some of the BIM-driven sort of sustainability goals that you can achieve during designing constructions. In terms of water, same argument that construction water usage associated with the construction processes on site can be optimized as well because of the streamlined processes and design coordination. In terms of waste, I think that is another one. Is quite proven as well globally that using BIM can help us. And in one of the slides we saw that that the rework cost, there were staggering numbers there, right? It was 10%. And using BIM and early design coordination, construction coordination, trade sequencing and subcontractor sequencing and so forth can reduce need for that on-site sort of extra sort of use of material and so forth. So it's absolutely, waste is always number one sort of priority as well for people when embracing during design construction, embracing BIM, and quality, the defects and snags, and that getting that right first time mentality you want to embed as part of your construction processes. And BIM just helps you do that, because you can do that virtual rehearsal 100 times, 1,000 times before you hit the site and get it right first time. So it helps you improve quality, by having that early design coordination as well. Keith, do you want to add anything to it?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. So in the in the interest of time, I think we'll just go ahead and move on here.
To the next. Yep. Okay, over to you.
Excellent. So, as that poll showed earlier, there is certainly a large percentage of people are focusing on the design and construction phases when it comes to BIM, but we are slowly starting to see the increased use of BIM in the operational phase as well. Now, we see industry challenges and things like data transfer between ownership and what have you, but that operational phase, as Rahul pointed out, is the longest phase of a building life cycle. So, if you have a building that lasts 50 plus years, you might only be constructing it for a year or two or what have you, but the rest of the 50 years, it's all operational, right? So I intentionally sort of made the energy bullet minimal on this one because I think the benefits are somewhat obvious when it comes to energy, right? So all the stuff that you're able to design in at the design phase is going to reap those benefits in the operational phase. So, any kind of downsizing of equipment that you can do, any kind of efficiencies that are built into the design process, all that plays out in the operational phase. And I think that's sort of common knowledge. So I intentionally kept this at one bullet. Now, some of the things that are applicable in the water consumption area are also applicable to energy. So you can kind of translate them back and forth if you like. For instance, that first bullet on water, ongoing water usage can be monitored and fed back into the BIM model to actually improve efficiency, right? And that same thing could be said for energy consumption, right? So the nice thing about BIM is because you have that underlying data management process, you can then use that to make an adaptable model rather than just some static output that you would have in your typical building operations processes, right? So that flexibility and adaptability of using BIM in the operations and maintenance phase is a huge benefit that comes from just establishing that structure. Obviously, enabling water reuse through design. There's many ways that you can reuse water or reduce the consumption of water. Everything from eliminating once-through units to using gray water for flushing of toilets. All kinds of things like that can be designed in and then monitored using a BIM type program. And then a lot of people I don't think are thinking of space use optimization when they're thinking of BIM, or at least using it at the operational phase. But if you think about it, the more you optimize the use of space and how you position people in your building, this has direct impacts on your consumption of energy and water throughout that building, right? So if you don't have to supply energy or water to a certain area of the building, that is necessarily going to decrease your usage for that building. So just being able to do proper space management is a huge benefit of implementing BIM in the operational phase. Down to the quality section, one of the biggest benefits I see of using something like BIM is that you don't have to make a physical change in order to figure out if an asset change will be beneficial to you or not, right? So you can use the BIM model to spec out any physical changes prior to actually doing it and optimize your material choices, optimize how long the processes are going to take, what kind of space usage configuration you might want to set forward. So all that can be done in a virtual environment without having to do the work and then the rework that would typically be associated with a tenant build out or something of that sort. Similar to the construction phase, material shipments can be optimized. So there are ongoing material needs as you operate a building, filters, gravel, all kinds of random stuff, right? A lot of times you end up shipping that and storing it in your building because you never know when you're going to need it. So as you're able to use a BIM model to more effectively forecast your life cycle usage of these materials, you can thereby decrease how much you need to store on site. Same thing with ongoing maintenance. There are life cycle models that can be incorporated into BIM in order to look at things like machine maintenance and things of that sort to accurately predict when something is likely to start to fail, end of its life, that sort of thing. And then I'm going to skip some of these, but one of the ones I mentioned earlier is that increase in quality is often directly associated with sustainability of products, right? So if you're buying a higher quality product that'll last twice as long, that means you don't have to produce two sets of the lower quality product, therefore decreasing your emissions and your sustainability of your building.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add?
No, I think these are really good one. The last one, actually, yeah, you're right, absolutely. That that lifespan, increasing lifespan of asset, is a really important one, and BIM allows you to be a lot more proactive in terms of planned preventive maintenance regimes and things like that, right? So, having that information at your fingertips and continuously, having that up-to-date information about your key assets, maintainable assets, allows you to be a lot more proactive in terms of, not only maintenance, but ensuring that you extend the life cycle of the key asset elements. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Keith.
Excellent. If we can go to the next slide here. So one of the areas that if you follow any of the stuff that I produce, I talk about circularity a lot. And so, as we're looking at the end of life of any building, there are, a lot of options to what you can do there. Now, typically speaking, the most prevalent thing to do when a building reaches the end of life is to knock it down and start fresh, right? However, when we start to use things like data-driven decision-making, BIM specifically, we can start to help out the end-of-life phase by incorporating changes at the beginning, right? So anything that we do to do things like what's called design for deconstruction. So essentially using building processes and materials that can then be reused as the same type of building material for a new building. Anything that you do in that regard is inherently going to increase the sustainability of a building. The other thing that I really like to point out is that when you come to the end of a life of a building, one of the primary challenges is that you don't always know what's going on inside that building, right? So when you're thinking about reusing it for a different purpose, there's always some hesitancy because you don't know what the quality of the initial build was. You don't know where all the stuff was running. You don't know a lot of things about the initial building, right? So just being able to spec that out in a digital model can actually encourage building reuse rather than a complete knockdown and rebuild, which is excellent. So they always say the most sustainable building is the one that's never built. The next most sustainable building is the one that you can reuse for a different purpose, right? So any modeling of that building that can encourage the reuse is inherently going to be good for sustainability. So, of course, any kind of decreased demolition or rebuild or anything of that sort is going to decrease the energy and fuel consumption, leading to decreased emissions. And then, as you are looking at the recyclability or the reusability or the disposal characteristics of various materials at the end of a building's life, you can have a lot more precision in what is reusable and what is not, right? So you have a better idea of what is going to end up having to be recycled and things of that sort, allowing you to create a better waste management plan, which is the fundamental aspect of a strong sustainability program at the end of life of a building, right? So that's sort of the fundamentals here. We can build on the scope a lot in this particular area, but these are the key qualities. So Rahul, I'll turn it over to you to see if you have anything you want to add here, or if we just open it up for Q&A since we only have 5 minutes.
No, I think you covered pretty much everything, and I'm conscious of time, so I think we should give time for Q&A. But before that, Anne-Marie, over to you. If you want to.
I know we're running short on time, so a little bit about BSI quickly. Our purpose is inspiring trust for a more resilient world. We offer expertise, knowledge, innovation, and best practices. We have a strong global footprint, as you can see here, 84,000 clients, 193 countries, and 128,000 client sites. A little bit about BSI Solutions. We have our training solutions, both virtual and face-to-face, for a variety of ISO standards, including ISO 9001 for quality and 14001 for environmental management, and of course our BIM classes. We offer certification services as well for a variety of ISO standards, and including ISO 19650 BIM, verification and kite mark. And of course, we also have consulting services, including sustainability services. If you are interested in any of our BSI solutions, please indicate this on the post-event survey, which will pop up as soon as the webinar is finished. Now, I know we only have a few minutes, but we do have some questions. One has come in from, I believe it's Mr. Finch. BIM is not an answer in itself, but a facilitating tool. How will it enable us to make better informed decisions?
Yeah, so I'll let Rahul answer this, but from my perspective, I see BIM, right, like you said, is exactly that. It's the underlying foundational structure that enables everything else, right? So it's hard to have any sort of decision-making tools or processes or what have you if not everybody is speaking the same language, and that's in my mind what BIM enables. So, Rahul, you?
No, I think you covered pretty much. And in terms of making informed decisions, you need to have the right information at the right time with you, right? So, and BIM just facilitates that. It facilitates that collaboration. It improves that collaboration, and most importantly, it gives the right information at the right time. And you can also like overlay some kind of machine learning and other like the advanced tools on top of the collected information through BIM to generate some insights, from the data that you collect, right? So there's plenty you can do once you start collecting structured information to make informed decisions. Absolutely. Thanks.
Okay, great. We have another question here. So can BIM help optimize material and energy usage? Can BIM be used to capture GHD data, for example?
So playing off of that last question, I think the better way to phrase it is that BIM can help drive the calculation of sustainability data. So BIM in and of itself is not what's going to calculate your emissions, but having that underlying framework and data management, data governance allows you to more accurately not only measure but predict any future greenhouse gas emissions. So I think that's the best way I can phrase it.
And then one last question, and then we've got to wrap up. Maybe Rahul, this is a question from the audience. How do I encourage leadership to see the benefits of BIM implementation?
Well, that's a good one. I would advise always start with your leadership's strategic objectives and vision. See what are the top priorities, right? If you want them to listen to you or your BIM initiatives, and try and find one or two sort of practical small, but practical small wins where it links with your leadership's strategic objectives, and then they would be open to get involved and listen to your story and your BIM implementation initiative. That's how in the past I managed to get buy-in, not by showing them some hypotheses of what BIM is, because yeah, it's good to talk about the hypotheses of BIM, but wouldn't it be great that you can share some practical evidence of how BIM has already helped some small wins, already helped improve something, whether it's productivity, reduce cost or something, safety and what have you, and then go with that story, and then you can get the buy-in from your leadership.
Great. Okay,
Practical
so
example.
thank you, Rahul. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and thank you to our speakers, Keith Bryan and Rahul Shah. All participants today will receive a link to the recording of the webinar, as well as links to our featured handouts, the sustainability report, and the little book of BIM. However, in order to get this great content, you must complete the post-event survey that will pop up as soon as the webinar is finished. If we didn't get to your question, we'll get to you one-on-one after the webinar. If you have any other questions regarding sustainability or BIM or any of our solutions, please indicate this on the post-event survey and we will get back to you right away. Once again, thank you everybody for attending and have a great day. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone. Bye.
Bye.